All right, so we are doing your life story interview. My name is Natalie Barras. Please introduce yourself, sir.
My name is Jayanti Shah. I'm 73 years old. I was born in Nairobi, Kenya. I did my A-levels in Kenya, or equivalent of A-levels, what was the Cambridge High School certificate. Spent most of my teenage years and young years in Kenya, in fact, and came to UK in 1968.
I'm going to rewind right to the beginning. In fact, even to before you were born.
Right.
How come your parents were in Nairobi?
Right. Well, I think it's to do with British Empire. I think whilst everybody talks about them looking for opportunities, it is more to do with the administration, British administration at the time, encouraging people because they needed labour. Racism was in play, with hindsight this is, whereby they wanted intermediaries who they thought, into inverted commas, could trust. So they had Indian subcontinent people as an intermediary between British administration and native population. And that's but my parents went to Kenya just after the Second World War, before India became independent. I'm one of 7 siblings. My oldest brother was born in India. The next one was a sister who was born in Kenya, but before India became independent. I was born in Kenya after India became independent, but before Kenya became independent, and my other siblings, all except one, were born before Kenya became independent. And during that time, British government has passed a lot of immigration laws. So all 7 siblings have got different legal status. It's and this is within 70 years. So in a way, sort of, with hindsight, you observe what has happened and you look at the history of what has happened and you find out that it happened because of geopolitical issues rather than personal desires to make a better life. And people wanting to make a better life were encouraged to do so for the purpose of the administration at the time.
So your dad and your mum left India for Kenya. Why?
My dad went to Kenya because some of the relatives had gone, and there was a sort of feedback that life in Kenya is wonderful, etc. I think there was also a drought in Gujarat, where they originated from. But my mum didn't come immediately. My mum stayed for about 6 or 7 years before joining my dad. Later on, it's an interesting story. My mum's went to get a passport, and she was asked, "When were you born?" And she said, "I'm 25 years old." So on her passport, her date of birth is 1925, whereas her age was 25. So she loved it because her actual date of birth was 1919. So she appeared to be 6-7 years younger than she actually was. But she died a couple of months ago in 2022 at the ripe old age of 103.
I heard that. Divya had made a note of that happened.
Yeah.
I'm sorry to hear that. Going back to your mum's story, that's really interesting. I've heard tales even nowadays of people in India purposely changing their year of birth so that they can get longer in a government job or something, or earlier for a pension or something like that. Have you heard of that?
No. What I've heard is that people who migrated from South Asia to East Africa tended to declare their age as younger because at that time the child fare on boats and transport was a lot less. They also declared their age younger because there was poll tax in East Africa. So if you were under 18, you didn't pay any poll tax, basically. But I think that they are all romantic rumors. I think the real thing is at the beginning of century, Only thing that was recorded on people's passport was the year of their birth. The date of birth only came about fairly later on, probably 1960s, etc., or probably a little bit earlier. And the bureaucrats who put down the date of birth had a sense of humor. So there are a lot of people whose date of birth was 1925 are actually born on 1st of January 1925 because they didn't know the exact date. And sometimes 1st of January, beginning of the year. There are others who were born on 14th of February, Valentine's Day. There are others who were born on Easter Day at that time, and Boxing Day and Christmas Day. Quite an interesting. So you will find that amongst some of the people who have migrated from ex-empire or ex-colonies to Britain, they've got a date of birth. Most of them born on 1st of January. Now, that's very interesting.
So when were you born?
I was born in February, 1949.
What day?
25th of February, 1949. And a good month to be born, halfway through the academic year. Mind you, in Kenya, the academic year started in January, so it was earlier in the academic year. So I was sort of oldest in the class, so to speak.
What is your first memory? Can you remember how old you are? Your first memory?
My first memory is going to a community nursery school, which was right opposite where we lived, and wearing brown shorts. That's my first memory, is sort of greasy hair, all black. I don't have them anymore. All black hair. That was first memory. There was playground in there. There were swings in there. That's sort of quite interesting first memory. And the second memory is a bit naughty because I nicked a rose from somebody's garden, and they saw me through the window, and little me tried to stick it back on the plant. But not many memories. In Kenya, I tended to do a lot of hiking, camping. At that time, now I disagree with it, but at that time I was member of Boy Scouts. In fact, in 1965, 66, I was one of the first people to get what was known as a Lion Scout, which is equivalent of Queen Scout here. Because when Kenya became independent, it was no longer Queen Scout, it was a Lion Scout. We did a lot of celebrations during the Kenya independence in 1963, which involved sort of Boy Scout movement at three flags: a Scout flag, British flag, and the Kenya flag. And built a lot of big structure in what was known as, I think it was Uhuru Park, Uhuru being Republic in Kenya. But that was part of involvement in East Africa, mainly in Nairobi.
How old were you when you were in the Scouts?
Oh, I was in Scouts from age of about 11 to leaving school, 18, 19.
All right, so let's go back before the Scouts, when you were a little boy stealing roses in people's gardens.
Yeah.
Who looked after you when you were little?
It's very interesting because it was my mother. My mother never worked, but the South Asian community and Gujarati community, especially, or in fact all the other communities of South Asian origin, because India is a large country and there are a lot of communities, a lot of different cultures, a lot of different local communities, a lot of different religions. And in the religion that I was brought up with, which was the Oswal community, the Jains, there was a lot of toing and froing because there was nothing more to do, whereby uncles and aunts went to each other's house, etc. So in a way, being looked after They were carefree days, and being looked after. There was no nuclear family, so to speak. So you tended, and there was no security risk in terms of going out and playing outside, things like that. But mainly it was my mother who did everything. We used to go home for lunch, from school. There was part of everybody went home for lunch, and there was a school bus. So it was mainly my mother who looked after me.
Mm-hmm. What would she make you for lunch?
Well, there's another joke about it, but usually it would be chapatis or roti and shak.
What's
Usually,
shak?
Shak is what is known in Britain. I always dispute it, but what is known in Britain as curry, but it's different spicy food made out of different lentils. I was brought up as a vegetarian, remained as a vegetarian. Every whole diet was vegetarian. I remember sitting in the big yard, concreted yard, eating oranges and apples, as a fruit after lunch. Yes, it's quite interesting times. Yeah.
It sounds quite idyllic. I think we always remember things fondly, don't we, in the past?
We always romanticize past. Yeah, we forget bad things that might have happened, or tend to forget them, don't we?
Did bad things happen when you stole that rose?
Yes, somebody saw me doing it, but not really. I think the bad thing, I was a very good boy. I was an extremely well-behaved boy. And if you did something wrong, which very rarely happened, but if you did something wrong, my dad used to scold me for it, and says not even if I was right, he used to scold me for giving somebody an opportunity to complain about me.
What do you mean? Give me an example.
Well, an example where somebody comes in and says, it's difficult to remember the example, but if somebody says take the rose example, had it happened, it didn't happen, but if the owner of the house had come and complained about it, however minor it was, it would still be my fault. But there are occasions when I was party to other people making mischief. I didn't do it, but the parents of came round, adults came round and complained about me. And my dad used to tell me off for giving them an opportunity to complain about it. But I was a well-behaved person at the time.
Was your dad, was he quite strict?
No, I am very lucky because I have never ever seen even smacking within the family. I think violence, it's strict. Strict is a different word. It was more, even demanding is a wrong word to use. He was more sort of orientated towards this is the right thing to do. And I suppose that is where my attitude comes from. Let's do the right thing.
What did he do? What was his job?
He ran a lot of, initially he worked in a shop with relatives, but then he just traded. He worked in as a shopkeeper. People like to call it business, but it was main. He ran his shop with his brother, I remember him having a shop in the outlying village in Kenya, and he used to travel by car in the middle of night, no road lights, etc. It was quite adventurous, quite a sort of journey which was, looking at it romantically, it wasn't a chore, but looking at it must have been a chore, having to travel with all the goods to a remote place and travel back at night. Yeah.
Tell me about where you lived. Did you always live in the same house growing up?
No, we lived in the house opposite, as I said, nursery school for a while, then moved to nearer the other area. It was always a rented accommodation, and then lived again and moved third time to a house near a cinema. but it was mainly within the what was populated by the Asian origin community. We forget that apartheid type of thing were more an invention of Britain of separate development. So in Kenya, for example, Africans, Asian origin, and Europeans or British origin people never have anything to do with each other than normal trading. They lived in different areas, they went to different schools, they practiced different. So, I mean, I've been brought up with three languages, yeah, English, Gujarati, and Swahili. So you spoke English in school, Gujarati at home, and Swahili in the street. And that demonstrates how the society was run at the time.
Did you have any... So you didn't have any friends from other communities?
Oh, yeah. I think, again, other communities restricted to South Asians. Yeah. So you had Hindis, Punjabis, Sikhs, or Maharashtra. Everybody was within that community. And they were friends. We went camping together. We did a lot. Some of them are still around, and some of them are still my friends. One of the things I did about 10 years ago is started contacting all these people, because they're all over the world. Some are in the United States. And I've set up now a group, and since pandemic, we talk to each other third Saturday of every month on Zoom. So, and we get something between 20 to 25 people sometimes, and sometimes as few as 3. But it's nice. It's just exchanging the views. Most of them, and we try to move away from misinformation. Quite a lot of them just regurgitate what is happening in India. I've never been there. They regurgitate what is happening in the United States of Indian origin people. Don't know about it, and I always say, do you ever intend to go back to India? No, then improve your environment. Patriotism isn't my country right or wrong. Patriotism is my country. If there is something wrong, I'll change it, and I'll try to change it, and that has got to happen within your own environment. And so we have a lot of discussion about international affairs. I think what I find very interesting is they are more knowledgeable about what's going on in the world than some of my friends who were born and brought up in Southampton.
We shall discuss this a little bit later. I want to go back to school days. How were they for you?
Oh, I was an example. I was very studious. I was very, very nice. I was always used as an example as to achiever, doing well at school, etc. With hindsight, I think it's a bit embarrassing now, but with hindsight, at the time, I wanted to be top of the class, and I was. Yeah, and nobody had influences. It was me. So I'm going to be best at what is in front of me, basically.
How old were you when you went to school?
Well, I went to nursery school fairly early on, age of 3 or something, and then I went to primary school, where I was until 1962. This was a Vishal Primary School. It was a community school. Now in Kenya, I remember that the schooling at that time, everybody had to pay for schooling. It wasn't compulsory. So when you go to school, it is a decision taken by parents to send you to school. There are a lot of people who didn't go to school. But mainly the middle classes were Asians, and they had set up their own schools and they went to schools. They also, then in a secondary school at the age of 11, was what was previously government Indian school, which became Duke of Gloucester. Remember, not a pub, a school, Duke of Gloucester School, which is now renowned Jamhuri High School in Nairobi. It's one of the, everybody goes there. But at that time, people from Vishwashwar Primary School were only entrance to that school, because when I left school, just the year before I left school, the Vishwashwar community donated money to Jamboree High School to build a swimming pool. Now, remember, European schools, which by the way was called Duke of York School, had swimming pools. They had all the facilities, they had all the resources. Asian schools had slightly less resources, and African schools had no resources, basically. So it was very much those who could afford to send kids to school did. Asian community tended to have a charitable attitude towards those members of Asian communities who were in hard time, were subsidized by the Asian Communities Education and Relief Board. But it was very, very segregated. It was wrong, it was segregated. People were treated differently as to their origins rather than people being people.
What do you mean by, like in the Asian community, those that weren't doing so well? Like, what was the sort of, I guess, the range? What meant you weren't doing so well in the Asian community?
Usually they were where the father of the family had died young. Usually it was because women didn't work, basically. Or if they worked, they did sort of sewing and stitching, etc., which was not as high income. And their children, when they went to school, they were sort of subsidized. The ratio was very small, but because it was small, it stands out. One or two who were subsidized stands out.
Did you mentioned looking back as an adult on the situation and the segregation and whether it was right or wrong, but as a child, what did you understand about it?
Well, not as a child, but I did not participate. I did not partake or into conversation, but the usual conversation of the Asian origin community was, we can't trust Africans. And that was actually propagated by the administration, the white British colonial administration. Africans were very low, can't trust them, they're uneducated, etc., etc. Now, through the scouting movement, I had a lot of African friends as well. So we went hiking together, we went camping together, whole lot. Now that was very rare, and in that respect, today even today, lot of Asian origin people in East Africa who have really excelled in business and made a lot of money, they still regard Africans as, it's almost a colonial attitude. I think the British attitude was, somebody is not playing a white man. By that, what they meant was somebody can't be trusted. Now, the Asian origin people have taken that on board about Africans, but it's changing, but it's not changing as fast as I would like it to change.
What was the attitude amongst the Asian community towards the whites?
Oh, the way, again, with the hindsight, but the attitude was they will look up to. It's a bit like the sketch that two Ronnies did, didn't it? Where three people different heights. I look up to him and I look down to him. And if you put that in context of color, and I don't use the word race, I use color. So the white were superior, then the browns, then the blacks. So it was looking up. And I think psychologically, a lot of people of African origin also looked up to Asians. They shouldn't, but they did. There was no equity. People weren't seen as people. People were seen as were almost stereotyped as to what their origins were, rather than what they could bring to the table.
Talk to me more about the scouting. So when did you start in the scout movement?
I started in the secondary school in the 1962-63.
So how old would you have been then?
11, 12. And I did all the badges, and we went all hiking, and we had competition. By the way, in scouting, we had competitions whereby the competition was threefold: the European school, African school, and the Asian school. So you got, even there, the segregation was incredible. But through movements, then you became senior scouts, you got all the badges, you got toggles, and sort of used real leather. Me as a Jain who is not interested in any violence towards animals, was using leather to make up the tongues, etc. It was interesting time. I mean, one of the things I now disagree with scouting movement in because at that time you had to take a promise to sort of believe in God. I don't. So in a way, so I achieved the highest that you could within scouting movement, but I don't agree with it anymore. I write that on my CV, by the way.
What?
That I always, or used to write when I was looking for a job, I used to write in my CV that I achieved the best what I do, but now I don't agree with it. So, in a way, there was, when I came to Britain, I joined the local scouting movement, and very soon, so in fact, one of the children said, "My father doesn't want to come. This is nonsense." In terms of the belief system, it's almost conditioning, and that made me think, and it was right. So in a way, I was influenced by a youngster.
Tell me about Jainism then, and practicing Jainism in Africa.
Well, Jainism is again, it's a ritual. It's a tradition. Some people say it's not a religion, but it's a ritual, and people follow tradition. And people say we do this because that is expected of us. But by and large, most of the people within the Jain community were vegetarians. Some of us thought it was quite naughty to go out and eat meat, which we did occasionally. But usual, and we also had when we had a communal picnic or communal lunch, there were some of us who put eggs in to upset somebody else. But Jainism practice, they set up their Asar, which is the temple within Kenya, and they've done it all over the world. But the tradition of looking after our own, in my opinion, is wrong, because it defines our own, whereas not defining everybody as being equal. Black or white, male or female. Instead of defining equal, you define rituals. For example, one of the tradition, which is probably true within the Hindu temples as well, is menstruating women can't go to the temple. Now, I have no idea why, but that has become a ritual. Is there a religious connotation to it? I don't know. But, in a way, it's silly, in my opinion.
When you were younger in Africa, Jainism, I guess, connects your family to India, in a way. What other ways did your parents keep you connected?
I remember in 1962, for example, because there was a sort of Indian origin school, mostly in 1962, when there was a war between China and India. There was a campaign within our school to do sort of clothes production, food, etc., for the war effort for the Indian Army. Now you're looking at people who have still got some relatives in India, they still associate themselves to India. They still look at India as their country, even though I don't think many of them ever thought that they would ever go back. Some of them did. It's in a way. So the connection was one. What's the weather like? Have there been rains? Because most of the people I knew came from the farming area, so rain was quite important. What is happening? The news of what is happening in India was sort of propagated within the community, within the family. It was not only Jainism. I think it was true of most of the subcontinent origin people. It's interesting because, again, with the hindsight, and made it my business to be a busybody and find out about it, one tends to look at it and say, for example, one of the things was looking up to the white British community and portraying that, they did very good in India because they're building railways in India. And today we know that the railways were not built for the benefit of the local population. They were built to take the raw materials from part of the country to Britain, basically. And what was even more, that's our common history. Your mind, everybody's common history is there was an empire. There was a lot of things done in the name of empire. Now that sort of raw material being moved from India to Britain, manufactured and re-exported to India makes nonsense. But then in Kenya, I remember buying something that was made in London and came from London as being much more desirable. So the value system was wrong, but the value system was an imposition of the propaganda of the administration at the time.
With that news from India, about the rains and about how things are happening, politics, all that kind of stuff, how would you get that news in Africa?
Usually through, there were newspapers in Gujarati in different languages within Kenya, and they used to have reporters who were reporting back. So most of that was, I can't remember whether we listened to any radio programs. I think the radio was novelty. I remember getting the first television back in 1965, and but again, it was mainly looking at cowboy and Red Indian movies. Again, with hindsight, it was built around propaganda for mass distribution. That's in this case it was Hollywood, which was a distant arm. But I remember one story. There was a district commissioner, white district commissioner, who got a Cine 8 movie, role movie, and he took it to some village in Africa, and showed John Wayne sort of taking Native Americans. I showed that movie, and when the audience did not applaud the cavalry marching in, this district commissioner dismissed it as being they're ignorant. Politically now, they did not applaud it because they identified with the oppressed Native American population. And in a way, sort of objectives set by individuals were within the limit of their own exposure, their own environment, and the community that they mixed around with. So white district commissioners thought everybody loves Hollywood. Why does poor Africans in rural villages in Kenya don't? So in a way, sort of propagation of news was very, but there were letters which also took 2 to 3 weeks to get to you, at the time.
Did you have family still in India?
Distant families, yeah. The best thing I did with my parents was, after coming to Britain, is my brother sort of organized a trip for them to go to India in 1985, after having been away for many years, nearly 40, 50 years. And they went there, and the distant cousins who were cited to me as a child as, what would your cousin say, what would your cousin think, what would your cousin... Now, they went there, and these cousins, one of them was a gambler, one of them had got divorced, and one of them was alcoholic. It was the best dynamic education that my parents had, even at their age. Now, the point is very simple, is that I remember Kenya according to what it was then. Not being